At my husband's funeral, my sister-in-law declared, "I deserve his business more than you." I wiped my tears and said, "That's funny, because I have a surprise for you." She collapsed when the lawyer revealed. I don't even know how to start this, but I guess I'll just say it. My husband, Mark, passed away 2 weeks ago. It still feels unreal, like any second, he's going to walk through that door, complaining about traffic, asking what's for dinner, or giving me that tired but soft smile when he sees me. But he's gone. Just like that. I was still deep in my grief when his sister, Laura, decided my husband's funeral was the perfect place to demand his business. Yeah, you read that right. We were in the middle of the service, and I was sitting at the front, my hands clenched together so tightly that my nails were leaving crescent-shaped marks on my palms. The whole place was packed with family, friends, old business partners, and employees from the company Mark built from the ground up. Everyone was dressed in black, whispering, sniffling, mourning. And then there was Laura. She was sitting with her arms crossed, her expression stony, her eyes flicking around like she was bored out of her mind. I should have known something was coming, but I was too exhausted, too overwhelmed to even care. Then, right as the eulogies ended and we were about to head to the burial site, she stood up and cleared her throat loudly. I felt my stomach drop. "I have something to say," she announced, her voice carrying over the crowd. Everyone turned to look at her. I could already see the uncomfortable expressions on some of Mark's employees. They knew how she was. I knew too. But even in my worst nightmares, I didn't think she'd pull something like this. She turned to me, her gaze sharp, lips pressed into a tight line. "I deserve his business more than you," she said, her voice filled with entitlement. "You have no idea how to run it, and I refuse to let my brother's hard work go to waste." I think I stopped breathing for a second. People gasped around us. Someone muttered, "Is she serious?" Another person, I think it was Mark's best friend, whispered, "Unbelievable." I felt my hands shake, but I wasn't sure if it was from grief or anger. Probably both. My husband's casket was right there. We hadn't even buried him yet, and she was already trying to snatch up his company like a vulture circling a fresh kill. I slowly stood up, wiping away the tears that had been running down my face all morning. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I forced myself to meet her gaze. I took a deep breath. Then I said, "That's funny because I have a surprise for you." She narrowed her eyes. "What are you talking about?" I didn't say anything else. I just turned to the lawyer sitting a few rows back. Mark's lawyer. The man who had helped him draft his will when he got sick. The man who knew exactly what my husband wanted. He stood up, adjusting his glasses, then pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. "This," he said, his voice calm but firm, "is Mark's final will and testament. And, Laura, you might want to sit down." Her face went pale. And when he opened the documents and started reading, I watched as the blood drained from her face completely. She collapsed into her chair. Because what Mark had done. For a few seconds, there was silence. You could hear the sound of people shifting uncomfortably, the weight of what was happening settling over the room like a thick fog. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and started reading. "Mark Jacobson, being of sound mind and body, declares this to be his last will and testament." I kept my eyes on Laura as the words sank in. She was gripping the edge of the pew so tightly that her knuckles were turning white. I could tell she was panicking. She thought she had it all figured out. She thought she could waltz in here, claim my husband's legacy like some prize, and walk away as the new owner of his company. But she didn't know what Mark had done. The lawyer continued, his voice steady and unwavering. "To my beloved wife, I leave our home, our shared assets, and full ownership of my company, Jacobson and Company. She has been my partner in every sense of the word, and I trust her to uphold the values I built this business upon." There it was. Full ownership. I heard a few people murmur. Some of Mark's longtime employees nodded, as if they had expected this. Others just sat there in stunned silence, waiting for the explosion that was about to come. And it came. Laura shot up from her seat like she'd been burned. What? Her voice was so loud, so full of raw disbelief, that it made a few people flinch. The lawyer didn't even blink. He simply continued. Furthermore, I leave nothing to my sister, Laura Jacobson, as I have provided for her enough during my lifetime. She has made it clear that she does not respect my choices, and I trust my wife to do what is best for the company moving forward. Laura looked like she had just been slapped across the face. That's not true, she shrieked, stepping forward like she was going to rip the will out of the lawyer's hands. That's a lie. Mark wouldn't do that to me. People stared. Some whispered. My best friend, Olivia, who had been sitting beside me, slowly reached over and squeezed my hand. I took a deep breath. Actually, he did, Laura. No, 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 she shouted, turning to me with pure hatred in her eyes. You did this. You made him change it. You tricked him. I stood up, feeling a new kind of fire in my chest. Tricked him? I said, my voice lower now, but somehow more dangerous. Laura, do you hear yourself? Mark made this decision because he knew exactly who you were. You never cared about him. You only cared about what he could give you. More murmurs. A few heads nodded. Everyone knew it was true. Laura's face twisted with rage. Her breath was coming in sharp, furious gasps. This is bullsh*t. I deserve that company. I was his sister. His blood. And where were you when he was sick? I shot back. Silence. A heavy, brutal silence. Laura's mouth opened, then closed. She was shaking now, but not from sadness. From rage. You have no idea what you're doing, she spat. That business will fail under you. You'll run it into the ground. I felt something sharp twist inside me, but I held my ground. We'll see about that. Laura looked around wildly, like she expected someone to jump up and take her side. But no one did. Not even her own parents. She stormed out a second later, nearly knocking over an elderly woman in the process. The heavy wooden doors slammed shut behind her. I let out a slow, shaky breath. My hands were still trembling. But it wasn't over. Not even close. The aftermath, I thought that would be the end of it. I thought Laura would accept defeat and leave me alone. I was wrong. 2 days after the funeral, I got a call from one of Mark's closest business partners. You need to watch your back, he warned me. Laura's been making calls. She's trying to turn people against you. My blood went cold. She's saying the will was forged. That Mark wasn't in his right mind when he made it. I clenched my jaw. That's ridiculous. The will was signed, notarized, and done with Mark's full awareness. I know, he sighed. But she's desperate. And she was. Over the next week, Laura launched a full-blown attack on me. She went to the board of directors, trying to convince them that I was incapable of running the company. She spread rumors that I had forced Mark to sign the will when he was too weak to think clearly. She even tried to sue me. But the worst part? She broke into Mark's office. It happened late one night. The security cameras caught everything. Laura used a key she had stolen years ago, ransacked Mark's private files, and tried to steal company documents. I got the call from security at 2 a.m. She's here, the guard told me, his voice tense. We've already called the cops. I rushed over, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. By the time I arrived, the police were already there. And there was Laura, standing in the middle of the office, surrounded by shredded papers, her hair a mess, her face twisted in sheer desperation. The moment she saw me, she lost it. "This should have been mine," she screamed as the cops held her back. "It should have been mine." I stared at her, feeling nothing but exhaustion. Then I stepped forward and said, "You're done, Laura." She froze. Then the officer spoke. "Ma'am, we're placing you under arrest for breaking and entering, theft, and destruction of property." And just like that, Laura Jacobson, the woman who thought she could take everything from me, was dragged away in handcuffs. But even as I watched her go, I knew, this wasn't over yet. Because people like Laura, they never give up that easily. And I had a feeling she had one last trick up her sleeve. I wish I could say that Laura getting arrested was the end of it. That she finally got the message, that she'd crawl back into whatever hole she came from and leave me alone. But no. People like Laura, they never go down without a fight. And I should have known she had one more move left to play. The mysterious audit. It started about a week after her arrest. I was sitting in Mark's old office, still trying to adjust to the weight of running everything on my own, when my assistant rushed in looking pale. "You need to see this," she said, handing me an official-looking envelope. I opened it, skimming the words, and my stomach dropped. It was a government audit. A full-scale investigation into the company's finances. I sat back in my chair, gripping the paper tightly. "Who requested this?" My assistant hesitated. Then she said, "Laura." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Of course. Of course, she wasn't done. After failing to steal the company outright, after being arrested for breaking into Mark's office, she had gone for the nuclear option, trying to drag me down legally. The audit meant the government would be going through every single financial record of the business, looking for any sign of fraud, tax evasion, or wrongdoing. If they found anything, even a tiny mistake, I could lose everything. And Laura knew that. The secret account. I immediately called Mark's lawyer. He was calm, reassuring, told me not to panic. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I need to ask," he said carefully, "did Mark ever mention a private account to you?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "A secret bank account. Money that wasn't reported on the company's official books." I felt my stomach tighten. No. Mark would never do something like that. But the way the lawyer went quiet, I knew something was wrong. The next day, the forensic accountants started going through everything. And then, they found it. A hidden offshore account. Millions of dollars. Money that wasn't on any of the company's financial records. I felt my heart stop. "What the hell is this?" I whispered, staring at the documents in front of me. The accountant shook his head. "We don't know yet. It could be something innocent, a personal investment, maybe. But if the government finds out before we figure it out," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I already knew. If the government saw this account before we had an explanation, I could be charged with fraud. And that's when it hit me. Laura knew about this. That's why she filed the audit. She had known this account existed, and she knew it would destroy me. The confrontation. I didn't even hesitate. I drove straight to Laura's house. She was out on bail, sitting pretty in her overpriced house, probably waiting for the moment I'd crash and burn. When she opened the door and saw me, her lips curled into a sick smile. Well, she purred. "You look stressed. Something wrong?" I shoved the documents in her face. "You set me up." She blinked, then let out a fake gasp. "Oh dear. Did someone find a little hidden money?" My hands clenched into fists. "You knew about this account. You knew they'd find it." She tilted her head. "Of course, I did. You think I was going to let you waltz in and take everything that should have been mine? You're pathetic, I spat. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a deadly whisper. You don't get it, do you? She murmured. You're just temporary. Mark is gone, and no one wants you running that business. You're nothing. The company will fall apart, you'll go to jail, and when the dust settles, I'll be the one left standing. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. But then, I smiled. And Laura frowned. What the hell are you smiling about? I leaned in, my voice calm and even. Because I have a surprise for you. The betrayal. Laura didn't know everything. She thought she had set me up perfectly. But what she didn't realize. Mark had already told me about the account. Months before he died, he had mentioned it to me in passing, just a brief comment about an old investment account he had forgotten about, one that had been sitting untouched for years. I never thought much about it, until now. And the best part? The documents showed exactly who had accessed it last. And guess whose name was on the most recent withdrawal? Laura. She had taken money from the account, after Mark died. Which meant she had committed financial fraud. Which meant I had her right where I wanted her. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I know what you did, I said, my voice clear. And now? So does everyone else. Laura's face went pale. I've already sent everything to my lawyer. You thought you could take me down? You just destroyed yourself. For the first time, Laura looked scared. Truly, deeply afraid. I turned to leave, but before I walked out the door, I looked back at her one last time. You wanted this company so badly? I said, tilting my head. Enjoy watching it from a prison cell. And with that, I walked away. The final blow. The next morning, my lawyer filed charges against Laura for embezzlement, fraud, and tampering with corporate assets. By the time the government agents arrived to investigate the audit, I had already cleared everything with them, and handed them a full case against Laura. She was arrested again within 24 hours. This time, she wasn't getting out. And me? I walked into Mark's office, sat down in his chair, and finally, took a deep breath. Because this time, Laura was gone for good. Laura was done. The moment the government agents got my documents, everything fell apart for her. The stolen money, the fake audit, the break-in, it all caught up to her. But the best part? The company's board of directors, the very people she had tried to turn against me, turned on her instead. The final courtroom battle. The trial took 6 months. Laura had hired the best lawyers money could buy, trying to weasel her way out of it. She swore up and down that she was the victim, that I had set her up. But the evidence? It was airtight. The bank records showed she had transferred money from the offshore account into her personal one, after Mark's death. The security footage showed her breaking into the company office. The emails showed she had contacted the IRS to trigger the audit, hoping to frame me for financial crimes. She dug her own grave. And when the judge read the verdict? Guilty on all counts. I watched as her face went completely blank. Then? She collapsed in her chair. Just like at the funeral. The same woman who stood over my husband's casket and told me I didn't deserve his company? She was now looking at a 15-year prison sentence for fraud, embezzlement, and breaking into corporate property. I stood up, adjusted my blazer, and walked past her without a second glance. Laura's final plea. But Laura? She wasn't done humiliating herself. As the bailiffs grabbed her, she suddenly turned to me, her voice shaking. Wait, she gasped. Wait, please. I didn't mean for it to go this far. We're family. I stopped. Slowly turned around. She looked desperate now. Not angry. Not smug. Desperate. I took a deep breath. Then I leaned in close. You stopped being my family the moment you tried to steal from me. Her face crumbled. And then? She was dragged away. The sweetest revenge after the trial, things settled. I ran the company exactly how Mark would have wanted, with fairness, respect, and honesty. The employees who had been scared of Laura's influence? They came to me one by one, telling me how grateful they were that she was gone. The business thrived. Better than ever. And Laura? She rotted in prison. Oh, she tried to appeal. Tried to get her sentence reduced. But no one cared. The same people she had tried to manipulate? They testified against her. And as for the money she stole? The court ordered her to pay every single penny back. Since she was in prison and couldn't work, the government seized her house, her car, and all her assets. Everything she had? Gone. And me? I moved on. I kept Mark's company alive. I honored his memory. I lived the life Laura tried to steal from me. And every now and then, I think about her sitting in that cold prison cell, wondering how everything went so wrong for her. And I smile. Because justice was served.